And sepsis means everywhere. And the ER was very late in diagnosing it. And another few hours, I've been dead. They were putting some antibiotics in it, but it didn't touch the strep. And I was in there 2 weeks. And when you get that disorder, it will usually, not always, but usually attack a weak part of your body.
Yeah.
Which is my foot.
I saw you walk hobbling down the street.
So that's what that's?
That can't be any fun.
Not fun at all.
Let me step into the director's role a little bit. Take off your name tag.
Oh,
And slide belly up to the.
you remember that? Did you ever go to Sun Studios in Memphis?
Briefly took a little tour.
They have a music that was recorded. Elvis Presley, Johnny Cash, Jerry Lee Lewis.
Oh, my goodness.
They were all sitting around just strumming it, you know. And the guy that ran the place just turned the recorder on and recorded it. And they were just strumming. I got a copy of the record.
That was my wife in the emergency room on Monday. 7 hours and they never got to a room. They have spots on the wall now that are designated as rooms.
Oh, yeah,
She fell.
she doesn't look happy about it.
She lost her balance. Just out for a walk. She was going downhill, but I was telling David a little bit earlier, we just got back from Orlando.
Are you recording now?
And she lost her balance and just fell flat on her face and broke her nose and sprained her wrist. And
My wife, back in November, fell in the Walmart parking lot and shattered her kneecap.
oh my goodness.
We're suing the Wallies.
You are.
Yeah, we are. Probably not gonna get anything, but we're suing
Tell you
them.
what, Walmart's becoming a dangerous place to go.
Yeah.
What happened with Home Depot?
Should we start this? Are we doing that right?
We're going.
Okay, you're just
We're having a conversation.
All right.
Ice water.
We're hearing about your lawsuit on our video.
No, let's not talk
The
about
one thing for sure we know is when we start writing the script, we've told everybody we may come back and get some very pointed and specific questions. So what we try to do is, if those 3 milestones, and there's others that hanging on Leo Frank impacted us, the gay resolution that came out of damaged our brand, and those are like sub-milestones, they're ugly pieces of our history, and it's impacted us. But we've constantly made this upward trend, and what we termed in our interviews is
The Cobb way.
And people who have lived in other places say the one thing that's unique to Cobb is the way in which we make decisions and how unselfish so many people are about giving themselves and not expecting money back. And decisions being made, we get together and make decisions. We don't scream at each other from our office to your office like the Cobb County and other places. There's a unique way, like Ernest Barrett, he'd get people together that had conversation. We've been a homogeneous, sort of focused issue county like nobody else. I hired a guy named Otis White. You know him? He's a community researcher.
Okay.
Written lots of papers and several books. We hired him the year I was chair to come in and assess Cobb County. And he does work all over the world. I mean, he's really on top of his game. He came back and said, I've never interviewed or studied a county like Cobb, like nothing I've ever seen before. And he said, I'm going to call it the Cobb way. And Roy Barnes talked about it on the trailer. It's just the way we make decisions around here. It's like what happened with Tommy Alligood. We make decisions, we're out in the open, we don't hide things. And believe it or not, one superstar in that whole process was Otis Brumby. You knew you couldn't tell a lie. You couldn't steal money. He was like a policeman, in some regard. And so we went through history that way. That's why we made it. It's why we haven't had any civil rights stuff. We sit down and talk. What's the civil rights leader that was I mentioned the other day? He's
Sharpton.
Sharpton was going to come down here when we had this police officer deal, and he was going to riot. We got Dan Bonner, that time the chief of police, Rob Hozak, and one other person sat down with him and reached a settlement on what they were going to do with respect to that individual. So he went away. It's not reported in the paper because it's not the Cobb way.
You can't, not many debates are won on the front pages of the newspaper on the 6 o'clock news.
Mhm.
The work happens around a table like this table. Wish we could teach some people in Washington about that, but.
Well, most counties don't do it either. I used the example yesterday. I was asked to, when I was at Georgia Power, to facilitate a strategic planning, economic development session with Burl Ellis.
Mhm.
And so I said, yeah, I'll be happy to do it. The company always gives to others. So I went down there, met with Burl Ellis and his whatever, he's president of DeKalb County, I think, and several of his team. He said, we will do this, but the Chamber of Commerce can't be involved. What?
What?
What the report you got? So we're going to have a meeting to define the future of DeKalb County with input from everybody except the business community. See, just don't do that.
Crazy.
Just don't do that here. That's they were out and open about it. So it's just why couldn't you get people
Well, you know,
together and
that's
talk about
what
it?
Tommy Alligood says is why he got into politics in the first place, is that he was doing some property development. He went to the city for some kind of zoning request, and they treated him like dirt.
Mhm.
And they were so anti-business, and he decided, well, I'm just going to run for the Board of Aldermen.
That's right.
And you know, he changed things big time with that regard.
I wonder how many people in America run for office because they're angry about something.
Well, in his case, you know, he really ran against the person that gave him a hard time, along with some city officials. But I think, you know, what you're talking about, the Cobb Way, goes back at least to the World War II era, and Jimmy Carmichael and Rick Blair and George McMillan, and then by the 50s, Fred Bentley Sr. and Harold Willingham. And Harold Willingham is very controversial in that I don't think you can say that he didn't make any money off of what he was doing, but nonetheless he still accomplished a lot. I just really, everybody involved in local government, it seemed like in that period, was interested in building that infrastructure that you needed for a county that was growing.
What year was that? Do you remember? In your book, you had the year, but I don't remember.
For
The Willingham is starting that.
Well, he was there by the late 40s, early 50s. I can't remember the exact year that he first went to the state senate. But he was there by 1950, I know, because I had a story that I think we got from Willingham about Herman Talmadge coming into Cobb County to campaign in 1950 as already governor, but he's running for a full term. And goes up to Ackworth, and he's asking people, what can I do to win your support? And what they wanted, they had their sub dam by that time to create Lake Ackworth, and they wanted a beach. And the commissioner and the people in Ackworth, and Willingham was involved, just sat down with the governor and said, we'll support you if give us the money to build a beach house and bring some sand in to build a beach. And he promised them, I forgot, $25,000, went a lot further back then than it does today. And then I forgot how it worked out, but somehow or other it was going to be a lot more expensive than that, but Talmadge didn't remember what the amount was anymore. And so they got what they wanted, and they supported him, and he came through.
Yeah, right.
And and I guess whoever was in charge of parks was going to give him a tough time over the lake, and Talmadge just called the park director in and said, "Do you know who's the governor of the state? We're going to do it this way." And that's the way
Why
they
brought
did
it up.
Yeah.
You could cut this out, but I'm surprised he didn't have that money in his pocket.
Did you ever hear the Goldwater story in Cobb?
I've heard some Goldwater stories.
Well, he came down here unexpectedly. We'll
No.
get you some footage of that. Ty, you want to repeat it? You've looked at those films lately.
So the story is that John Williams and Johnny Isaacson were having a barbecue, and Barry Goldwater decided he wanted to show up. So the barbecue went from about 10 people to about 100 people. And once Barry Goldwater showed up, all the press showed up, and there's 1,000 people, and the cars were all up and down the street. And then it decided to rain, and that everybody was out in the rain, and there wasn't enough food, and
Yeah, they had food for
Bad to
a
worse,
couple
yeah.
dozen and 1,000 showed up.
Yeah, I didn't know Johnny was here in '64.
What was it, 64?
I'm not. I don't remember what the year was.
I don't know what the year. No, Johnny and Kessel were in business long before we saw them out in public domain.
Yeah,
Kessel Stelling was in there, which we're interviewing sometime in the next couple.
great.
Yeah, John Williams helped start Riverside Bank,
Uh-huh.
and Kessel eventually became the
Mhm.
president of that.
Mhm.
And he had another bank before then, and
Mhm.
Johnny was invested in real estate, you know, and
Mhm.
he
Yeah,
was
but
part
I-
owner of
yeah.
the bank. So that was a sort of East Cobb.
Yeah, I
real
was
estate.
thinking it was about 68, 69 that he was doing all that stuff out in East Cobb,
Yeah.
but maybe it's there.
Well, we're looking when Goldwater was running for
Well, 60,
election or re-election.
well, 64 he was running for president, but he could have been here.
Yeah,
for
he
some
was.
other
He was
reason.
already senator because they had an issue in the Gulf of Iran that he had to do something to take care of.
I've got a picture, I might have put it in my book, of Carolyn Dodgen Meadows, who's now the NRA president, as a Goldwater girl in 1964.
Along with Hillary Clinton.
But they had the Goldwater girls that just went all over North Georgia, they were dressed up in cowboy type outfits and short skirts and going and performing all over North Georgia. Carolyn Dodgen Meadows was the leader of the group.
Well, what was funny about this story is Ty said it rained, and if you knew John Williams, shrubbery and flowers and all that,
Yeah.
he was obsessed. That's what Post Property was. He
Yeah,
had these
right.
tulips brought in, and so his yard was pristine. By the time all the TV trucks left and TV channels put in, Ty, what do you say? It looked like a
Monster truck route.
whatever. Yeah, that's
One of
good.
my favorite stories, you know, of course, he put all that money into renovating the square in Marietta, John
Yeah.
Williams did. And I guess Bob Flournoy was mayor of Marietta at that time, and his comment was that the square had been restored to the grandeur that never was.
And the funny thing about John is he had no interest in Marietta, but that's the kind of stuff he did all the time.
Yeah.
He made a lot of money and he helped people that helped him make a lot of money.
Did he have an official office?
Not here, not Marietta.
No.
Just a citizen?
Well, Post Properties was everywhere.
Yeah, I remember that.
I've heard the story about 5 different ways, but it's something like this, and we got that on video. John Williams decided that the Cobb Chamber needed a certain kind of presence, and it needed a building that looked like where we were going to come. So he got the land donated from some federal agency for $1 a year. And then they had to raise, well, I don't know the number, let's say it take $20 million to build a building, pay cash. And so he called 17 people together in the office, closed the door and locked it. And he said, we're not leaving here till we raise enough money to pay cash. And he said, I'll show you my commitment. He opened up his checkbook and wrote $1 million check or $2 million, I don't know how much it was. He said, we're not leaving until everybody's made enough commitment that we can pay for it. And so when the building opened up, it was paid with cash.
Good night.
I know when I was there, you didn't have to pay rent or any, anything. It really helped the operation of the chamber because building space is a big part of any chamber and its operational stuff.
Yeah.
So.
Joe Mack Wilson did not like John Williams, apparently.
No, he didn't.
And, but he said John Williams ran Cobb County.
Well, he actually did very well. He part owner of the Falcons football team. He had 2 yachts. No, he was gazillionaire. Not only did he build around here, but he built in other places that you didn't see. He was up in Charlotte. He was one of these people. Everything he touched turned to gold. And he committed $1 million a year to the when the CPAC opened up, Cobb Energy Center. And if it wasn't for him, it never would have happened. He and Dwight Brown, who got together and put the money together to make it happen. He just, Cumberland would never be anything like it is right now.
Yeah.
And he got in a fight, he and Otis were like this all the time.
The old Bird Adams Boy Scout reservation.
Couple of months.
So Tom, your book is 800 pages or something.
Something like
I
that.
don't know how you did it. Think I told you before. I have no idea. I have a hard time writing a 15-page
Well, a
paper.
smart academic would have made 4 books out of them.
Okay.
Well, this
That
is
shows I wasn't
your,
real smart.
this is your PR man right here. Loves
I
that.
love the book, and I haven't read it all, but I've read pieces that I was attracted to. And the Lockheed story is interesting. I can't get anybody to go much further back than Mickey Blackwell. And he told the story very.
Well, I was really lucky when I was doing that book that there were still people around that had worked at Bell Aircraft.
Yeah.
And I was able to go out and interview them, and they've all passed away now.
Bob Ormsby was a good friend, and he would have been the last surviving. He was there in a big part of the whole thing, going way back.
Yeah.
But your book has captured a lot of the Bell bomber plant, which we can weave into Lee Ryan and Mickey, and I think make a great story about that because it's life changing. The thing about Lockheed, if it had stayed closed, it closed at the end of the war, then it opened back up.
Well, Bell closed it.
Bell closed, yeah, but the
Air Force Plant number 6.
That's correct. That's correct. It's a neat story about that. But anyway, it was an economic force in Cobb County, not like it is today. I mean, it was
Oh,
a county. It was a county. And so
sure.
if it had closed down, the impact of Cobb County would be astronomical. We had a lot of political support. Washington, D.C., Mickey told a lot of that, lots of lobbying and all kinds of stuff so we could get these programs in there.
Right.
And it's just fascinating. Today, if Lockheed were to close, it would be very impactful to Cobb. $3.2 billion per year to the state, 20,000 jobs to Cobb County. And if we have another BRAC, Dobbin will be a big candidate for closure. And if they do, Lockheed's going. And I'll say it on tape because they said it to me. They will go. There's a big pool out in Texas to get all manufacturing back to Fort Worth. So we've worked for the last 6 years to keep Dobbins open. And the problem is there are only 3 Air Force Reserve bases in Georgia. One is Moody down in Valdosta, the other's at one of Robbins Air Force Base, and then us. We're the smallest. We're in the best economic place you can be. The other 2 is shut down middle Georgia and Valdosta area.
Right.
So we've been trying to sell, you can't do it. The CDC uses this space. DEMA and FEMA, when they organize, they always come here in disasters, whether it be a ice storm or whatever. This is where they come. The Georgia National Guard sits out there. Georgia Tech's about to complete a huge investment out there. And if it's shut down, it's like a house of cards, a whole bunch of things will happen. But Lockheed today could make it, but back in the day, up until your book, we would have had a hard time recovering from it. Real hard time.
Are they still cranking out C-130s?
Yeah.
They just got another contract not all that long ago, so.
Had a little wing problem the other day.
Shut down, what, 150 of them?
Yeah. Oh, crap.
Yeah.
In one
But
place.
nonetheless, how long have they been making those things?
Yeah.
I mean, that's just-
Well, it was 54s when they started.
They just keep cranking them
So
out,
long
cranking
as,
them out, and they're just a vital
longest
part of our.
continuous production of any plane ever.
It's astounding, and it's
Yeah,
just
it is.
such a workhorse, and even the Coast Guard.
But you know, the difference is with the C1, with C5 particularly, C141 and then C5 continued that program. The C5 contract was an awful contract, and they lost money on it. They eventually had to negotiate with the federal government to limit the amount of money they were going to lose making the C5A. But at the peak, they were up to 33,000 workers there. You know, that big parking lot was full. That looks half empty when you go by it nowadays.
Yeah.
But the difference nowadays, that even if they had as many contracts now, or as big a contracts as they did back then, they do so much with robots nowadays that they don't need the workers that they used to have. So, what's the workforce, 5,000 over there now, something like
It
that?
was, well, right, high fives, 5,200, 5,000.
I'll tell you what, you look up in the sky and you see a C-5A, it takes your breath away. You know, just The thing's not going 5 miles an hour. It's just,
Well,
huge.
Well, you know, this is where Bob Ormsby really comes in too, the C5B contract, when they renovated all those planes, and C-141 in the 70s, they stretched them. I think they added 18, 20 feet in the middle of the plane and made it so you could refuel them from the air.
And this is a jet engine
Right,
version.
Yeah.
You seen in the movies where these
C-141.
tanker planes come over and put fuel?
Oh, yeah.
That's the plane.
Yeah, I've seen Dr. Strangelove.
But that's really what saved Lockheed, because, I mean, they were on the verge of going under in the early 70s with their problems with the C-5. And so they had, just tremendous number of layoffs from 33,000, I forgot what they went down to, but they went down significantly for a few years, and then those were the projects that kept them going along with the C-130.
One of the, I don't know if it was ever really out in public, but it was certainly talked about a lot. Lockheed had an early out program to reduce forces, and most of the experienced people were the ones that went out the door. And suddenly they started having simplified, the planes wouldn't fly anymore. And they had to bring those people back on contract. And that's why downsizing has to be, if it's one of these early out programs, you have to be real careful who you let go.
NASA had that same problem. There's people who say we can't go to the moon anymore because all that knowledge is gone.
So from the time the Bell Bomber plant closed up until Ernest Barrett, tell me a little bit about what you thought was significant.
Well, of course, it was only closed for 5 years, closed in 45. And, I think there's a great story about how that plant closed and you laid off 28,000 workers within a month or two time. And just a handful stayed on to finish the last few planes that were running off the runway. But by January of 46, everybody was gone from there. And they just used it as a storage facility until January of 51, when Lockheed reopened the plant. But, I think there's a great story that they laid off all those workers, and everybody's saying, oh no, we're going back to the Great Depression again in Cobb County, and it didn't happen. And to me, the real story is that they had so many training programs going on that people were gaining all kinds of skills working inside that plant. And so the people who left the plant in 45 were very different, much more prepared to go out and get a job or start their own business than the people that went to work there 2 or 3 years earlier. And so a lot of people did start their own companies. We had filling stations along the 4-lane that former Lockheed workers had opened up, and auto supply stores and all kinds of things that people did. Or they went into Atlanta and worked in the auto industry in the Atlanta area or whatever. But we did not, Cobb County and Marietta did not become a ghost town when you laid off all those people.
Some towns did.
They stayed, and while things were sluggish for the late 40s, you didn't go back to a Great Depression again, and I think it's because people had picked up all these skills, and the economy kept humming pretty well. And then, it was fabulous when Lockheed came in, and a lot of those people went back to work for Lockheed. But in those years, Ernest Barrett comes in at the same time that Cobb goes from a one-person commissioner of roads and revenues to the 5-member commission with 4 regional commissioners that were part-time and a commission chair that, for all practical purposes, was full-time. They've never been paid as much as they should have been paid for what they did on a full-time job, I don't think.
No, you're right.
But it was a full-time. People run for those jobs whether they pay them enough or not. But Ernest Barrett comes in as the first commission chair in Cobb County's history. Before that, you had the one-person commissioner that really worked along with, I guess, the probate judge. There's 3 people, the clerk.
Yeah, it's in the book. I read that segment. 3 or 4 people that work together.
That
in a-
basically are advisory to the commissioner. But Herbert McCollum, he was the first interview I did with Herbert McCollum, and by that time, he kind of felt like people had looking down on what he had accomplished in this administration. He was very happy for me to interview him because he wanted to talk about all that they'd accomplished. And they really did do a lot while he was commissioner, from 56 to 64.
So it was a turbulent time
But well, it's turbulent times and
in the nation.
the nation, and you know, he had his critics, and I guess for good reason in some cases. But that's also the time that Southern Poly, old Southern Tech, comes to Cobb County. Our leaders were able to steal it away from DeKalb County. I mean, it started in '48 in Chamblee, and the Board of Regents kept wanting them. They started in the military barracks from the Naval Air Station, Atlanta Naval Air Station, and DeKalb wouldn't put any money into upgrading the facilities. And I've got some horror stories about those barracks and the shape they were in when you started putting all that heavy engineering equipment in there, and holes in the wall and rodents and everything else. And this is Harold Willingham's story, but Cobb had an off-campus center of the University of Georgia. Marietta did. It started about 1950. There were about 10 of these off-campus centers around the state. I think Roy Barnes went to some classes there. And it operated all the way up and through the summer of '66. So it was here for about 16 years, but it never had a building of its own. It started out as a night program at Marietta High School, and then it was at Banbury Elementary. After Southern Tech came, they used some of the, Southern Tech had more space than they needed at that time. So they used some of that space, but they never had a building. They were trying to get a building. The state didn't want to put money into a building for an off-campus center in Marietta because everybody else in the world would want one too. And so the Board of Regents called Willingham and some others down to a meeting and said, why don't you make a play for Southern Tech? I mean, we would love for you to build a campus for that. And Marietta and Cobb County offered them the moon, more than anybody had ever offered before, to do that. They said, we'll buy the land, we'll give you the land, we'll put in all the roads, all the utilities, everything that you need, if you'll come here. And they were able to get Marvin Griffin, the governor, to give them the money that they needed for it in exchange for their support for a rural roads bill that never passed the legislature, but the Cobb delegation supported it anyway. And I forgot what, I think it may have been Willingham talking about, I won't say who he's talking about, but one of the legislators said, rural roads, what do we care about rural roads in Cobb County? And they had to tell them, well, we care about getting Southern Tech here. Yeah. And so that's what they did. They were able to get Southern Tech. And then in '58, the Board of Regents voted to move Southern Tech out of DeKalb County.
What year was that?
58, they voted on it. It's 61 before it actually opened here. But 58 is when they voted on it. And then just as soon as they did that, they went back and said, well, we're very happy to have engineering school here, but people want the liberal arts too. And so they started campaigning for a junior college. And again, the local leadership said, they promised the Board of Regents, not only will we give you the land, not only will we put in the roads and the utilities, we'll pay to build all the buildings. We'll pay all the expenses to put what became Kennesaw Junior College into Cobb County.
Well, you said, you used the term Cobb County said, Cobb County, who were the people?
Well,
Key people.
Well, Fred Bentley Sr. was your predecessor.
That's correct.
Let me think. Of course, Willingham, Raymond Reed.
Okay.
By the time you get into the '60s, certainly Joe Mack Wilson.
There's a whole story about him.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of stories about Joe Mack. Well, of course, Raymond Reed was the county attorney for a number of years, and it was Reed, Ingram, and Flournoy. Flournoy was the third of the three to come here to Cobb County. I think Pam Flournoy was something like a niece to Raymond Reed, something like that, some kind of tie that got the Flournoys here to Cobb County, and there's others that, certainly Barrett by 64, and Herbert McCollum plays a role in getting Kennesaw Jr. That committee of the Kiwanis Club plays a huge
Public
role.
affairs,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
which I've been involved in. It's a secret society of sorts.
Yeah.
Nobody knows how to get invited into it, but I was there for 10 years and the chairman was, but it's been around since the turn of the century. And they do all kinds of things. They were part of that whole.
Well, Bill Kenny had played a huge role, particularly for Southern Tech.
That's right.
Marvin Griffin was the governor. He had a pilot that was a member of that committee. His pilot was a member of the committee.
Read that in your book.
And so this pilot saying, well, you guys keep wanting all this. You don't know how to get it done. Here's how to get it done. And so, at any rate.
He probably whispered it as they're on a flight.
Yeah, probably. So, let's see, Jimmy Carmichael died in 1972, but he was instrumental in a lot of stuff in Cobb County throughout those years too. He's certainly one of my heroes.
Well, you've touched on it. Where the Chuck Clay's great-grandfather was here. Did he have generations before the Chuck Clay we know? Was there that family engaged in Cobb?
Well, going back, you mentioned his great-grandfather was a U.S. Senator from Marietta, about two houses away from, in a much smaller house, but two doors away from where the Senator Clay lived, the Clay House on Atlanta Street in Marietta. He was a U.S. Senator from 1897 to his death in 1910. And
he was living in Cobb though, wasn't he?
He was. Yeah, he lived in Marietta. Yeah, that was his house was in Marietta. He built about 1890, I guess, and lived on Atlanta Street from that time on. But the connection to Chuck is that Alexander Stevens Clay, named for a certain Civil War personage that you're familiar with, but Alexander Stevens Clay was the senator. He had a bunch of children, some more reputable than others.
Let's wait till the siren goes away.
Okay.
We were video Dan Cox here. Was it yesterday, Ty, or day before?
The day before.
Yeah, and the train came by. The infamous train came. We just had
I'm surprised we hadn't heard one yet.
I was making a speech out there one time about the Emancipation Proclamation, and I'm building. I get to my exciting conclusion. Woo!
Yeah.
I think we're good.
Okay, but at any rate, I say some of the sons were more reputable than others. Some of them had an alcohol problem, among other things. And there's a story of one of the Clay children went off to the University of Georgia and had all kinds of problems there with alcohol and fights and what have you, and got kicked out of the school. And then another son went there, and I think Clay's comment at the time was that I sent so-and-so to UGA and you ruined him. I've sent my next son to UGA to ruin the school. But the one that, and when I was involved with the Leo Frank lynching as well, Herbert, but the one that is Chuck's ancestor was Lucius Clay. Lucius D. Clay of Berlin Airlift.
Yeah, Berlin Airlift. Yeah, absolutely.
So that's his grandfather, Lucius Clay Sr. And of course he left Cobb County to first go to a prep school in Virginia and then to West Point and never came back to Cobb County. But he was instrumental in getting the Bell Aircraft plant to Cobb County.
The Berlin Airlift was one of the big impetuses for building the C-130.
Oh yeah, all that came after that. But during World War II, Clay stayed in Washington, and he really worked with the defense contractors. And back then you had to get government approval to get the raw materials for whatever you were making in your factory. And since he was the one that really decided who was going to get to develop, who was going to make Jeeps for the military and planes and all that, he's really one of the most powerful men in Washington in that time. Lucius Clay was. And so he was a pretty important person before the Berlin era.
What Mr. Eisenhower referred to as the military-industrial complex.
Exactly. And Eisenhower's a good friend of his. And Clay, he played a big role in developing the interstate highway system.
Absolutely. That was part of it too.
Is there a picture of the president in that Eisenhower in your book?
No, not of Eisenhower.
Okay, who was it, Ty, that showed us the picture? It was Dan Cox.
Yeah.
He's got a picture of Eisenhower. That very story, he's got a picture of it.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Well, at any rate, Lucius Clay Sr. had two sons. One was Lucius Clay Jr., and that's the father of Chuck. And Lucius Clay Jr. became an Air Force general. Do I have it right? Lucius Clay, wait a minute. Lucius Clay Jr., I guess he was in Air Force. I can't remember. The other one was named Frank. And both Frank and Lucius graduated from West Point the same year, 1942. And so they were involved in World War II.
Yeah.
And I'm getting my stories mixed up with which was which. But I think Frank was in the Army. I met Frank once. He came looking at the old family place. But at any rate, I asked Chuck when I did that interview with him, what was it like to grow up in a family where you've got a U.S. senator for a great-grandfather, one of the most famous generals in the 20th century military for a grandfather, another general for a father, and another general for an uncle. And there was no doubt that they learned a lot about patriotism and discipline and all those things growing up in the Clay household.
They learned a lot about the University of Georgia.
Well, and Chuck came to the University of Georgia for law school after going to the University of North Carolina. But it's really, what brings Chuck to Cobb County is after he graduated from law school, he went to work for Herb Rivers for the courts, the court system in Cobb County. And he became an assistant, well, first of all, assistant solicitor, I guess, and then an assistant DA, and then with Tom Sharon later on.
Yeah, Tom's a piece of history. Still working.
Are you okay?
Yeah. I just ran around a lot. No, it's just
You okay?
a little crazy.
Well, I'll probably have to stop sooner. I'm going to have to bill you all when they give me a parking ticket out there. 2 hour parking.
Yeah.
No, we can pick this up later. This has been fascinating discussion. But anyway, we're going to try to build a story from the Bell Bomber plant to Ernest Barrett. We've already started doing that. Really interested in how K through 12 and Merida school system.
Yeah.
We met with James Wilson. You familiar with him?
Vaguely.
He was the deputy superintendent for 4 Cobb's superintendents, so he was always the number 2 guy when they came in.
Yeah.
Then he went to Fulton County, and they were in a mess, and they asked him to come down for 6 months. He stayed 4 years.
Yeah.
Now he runs a consulting company helping K through 12 program. But anyway, he told a lot of the story of how Cobb bumped and when they had bad times and all that kind of stuff. Are you familiar with any of that?
Yeah, and I did an interview with Stanley Wrinkle a few years
I
ago.
saw that.
Who unfortunately died, in an automobile accident a year ago.
Everybody's told us to talk to Kerman Keenan.
Yeah, absolutely.
He has said he would like to do it. I haven't talked to him personally, some other people have. Any names that come to mind that I'll read off again. You remember me reading all through all the
Well, I heard
I think
about
I did
that.
part of them anyway. John Williams, a couple months before he died, Tad Lee Ted. Joe Daniel, who's a storehouse. Great stories. Mac Henderson, who can't do interviews anymore. Johnny Isaac.
What's the matter with that?
Just old age. We were all getting there. He could barely talk.
Well, I did an interview with him 2 or 3 years ago. Stanley set it up, by the way.
Who did?
Stanley.
Okay.
He knew him from church, I think.
He was a.
No, he couldn't have known him from church, but he knew him anyway.
He was a past chairman of the chamber. Chet Austin started Tip Top
Yeah,
Poultry.
yeah.
Roy Barnes, Conley Ingram,
Mhm.
Lindsey Tippins, Bill Shipp,
Sure.
Buddy Darden,
Sure.
Earl Smith,
Mhm.
Bob Trovan, Bernie Brown, Johnny Gresham, Tim Lee and Mike Plant together, Deanne Bonner,
Mhm.
Mickey Blackwell, Lee Ryan, who am I missing, Ty? James Wilson, who I already mentioned.
Yeah.
There's another one that I'm not thinking about. One of the things I said to everybody was, here's the people we can no longer talk to. Betty Siegel,
Yeah.
Otis Brumby.
I've got a bunch of interviews with Betty, and at least one of them is videoed.
Do you?
It's
Oh, really?
a short one, but most of them we did audio, but one of them we did in the rear book room at Kennesaw, and we videoed that. So
Can
at least,
we-
and we got all these films at Kennesaw too of every graduation we've ever had, and she makes the same speech at every graduation pretty much, but we've got all those on file.
In what format, I'll ask on Ty's behalf.
I'm sure you've spoken at our graduation.
I have. Dan had me speak at one a few years
So
back.
we've got a video of that.
What kind
It
of
goes in,
video?
actually,
What kind of video?
What kind of video?
Well, I mean, they just filmed all the speeches.
I'm talking about, is it on VHS or Beta or digital or?
Well, you start back with the ancient, back in the Horace Sturgis age, I guess, with the ancient.
It's pencil drawings.
Jack Wilson, who I know you know,
Yeah.
who can't do it anymore. He's had a stroke. I actually
Oh, my.
with him a couple weeks ago.
I did an interview with him, and he never would take the final look at the interview, but I've got the interview with him if you want to see it.
Yeah, I'd love to. Butch Thompson, and I regret that because I'm with him a lot. I just never got around to Fred Bittney Sr.
Yeah.
Uh,
We did some interviews with him a long time ago.
I had Harris Hines scheduled the week after he got killed.
Oh, my.
So I missed out on Winston Strickland.
Yeah.
Strick, there's a fascinating story about him, one of the most powerful people in Cobb County.
I've
But he's a
had a
barber.
couple of interviews with him, the
Did you?
students did.
Fascinating guy. He did so much behind the scenes.
Yeah.
There's so many great stories.
Well, we got some of those,
Do we?
we know the stories, it's just an audio tape, but.
Well, that'd be fine.
We got the stories.
Because you can obviously, in
And the
a
transcript.
documentary like that, put his face up there and have the voice. I mean, that's the way of doing the interview without the person
Yeah.
still being here.
Yeah.
It's a good idea to keep it short though.
Yeah. T.W. Lloyd,
Mhm. Oh, yeah.
A.D. Little,
Mm-hmm.
Ralph Williams, Stan Wrinkle, who you've already mentioned, and there's probably some others that would have been great to interview before they left. What's the guy's name? Reverend Travis,
Mhm.
Harris Travis.
Yeah.
Have you interviewed him?
Because he was well, actually, I had a student that interviewed him, but, because he was doing his own autobiography, I guess,
Yeah.
he didn't really.
He
want
was
to cooperate.
preacher at Zion Baptist Church's historical church.
And before that, he was vice president for academic affairs at Southern Poly.
So he's got both of those pieces of the story.
Yeah, Steve Cheshire's still around.
I know Steve, I've talked to Steve, he goes to my church.
Does it?
I've known him a long time. And he said something had already been written on him, but. I
Well,
said,
we
"Steve,"
interviewed him.
Right.
But
And
that's,
yeah, he told me that
but
you
if
did.
you wanted to get a good video, you need to do it again.
He told me this for what, so he's losing his memory.
Oh, really?
We all are to get older, but he just went ahead. I said, you got some great stories to tell. I said, yeah, but I'm losing my memory. He's got the best artifact collection of anybody probably in Georgia of the ancient biblical times. He's got stuff that was in the year of Christ. I mean, he's got this, it's amazing, 2 full floors. I don't know how he ever bought them, but he goes on tours over there all the time.
Steve Cheshire is really, Steve Cheshire and Travis were colleagues from Purdue University.
Okay, I didn't know that.
They went to graduate school for their doctorates over at University of Illinois. They couldn't do it at the same institution where they were teaching, so they went to the University of Illinois and they traveled over there, hour drive, I guess, or whatever, 2 times a week and go to dinner together and come home together. So they were really close friends.
Well, one thing we did in Cobb that's part of the Cobb Way, I'll get you out of here in a minute, part of the Cobb Way was we had what's called the Cobb Education Consortium. And that was the superintendent of both our programs, KSU, Southern Poly, Chattahoochee Tech, and they'd get together once a quarter, was it, something like that, and they had some leadership program. But the main issues, they got together and talked. And that doesn't happen in a lot of communities, they just got together and talked, it wasn't covered by the media. What do you think of Roger Hines, who I know, or used to know? Is he a good one to interview or not?
You want to zoom in? Are you still on all three of them?
Yeah, I was still on all three.
You might want to
Because
zoom
you're-
in on him a little bit here.
Oh,
You can talk.
better be careful what I say.
What time, Tom, what's your drop dead time?
Oh, whenever you want to stop, I'll just send you the bill if I get a ticket out here.
That's right, we'll
Oh, no, I'm
pay it
kidding. I'm kidding. Roger, you know, I read his columns and I don't agree with him half the time, but he was very popular when he was in the legislature for the people up in the Kennesaw-Atworth area, from what I can understand.
That's what I knew him back then, when he was,
I mean, I think it's kind of like a Kermit Keenum story of coming out of poor farm country in Mississippi and doing very well in life, and sure, why not interview him?
the Otis Brumby 3, we didn't get 2.
I'm gonna say the people that write for a living sometimes are the worst people to interview.
Like Bob Barr, I've known a long time, he'd be a terrible interview.
Bill Kenny, he had the stories for himself, didn't want to share them with anyone.
So who owns Leo Frank, based on, you don't know for sure, but as a historian, who would you think might have done that?
Oh, I don't have much doubt that Jim Conway was the real murderer.
Jim Conley.
He was the janitor.
Yeah.
I mean, he virtually admitted to it, and I mean, it's always possible that it's somebody we never heard of that did it. I don't think Leo Frank did.
No,
And they did a number on Frank and his reputation throughout that trial.
well, who hung him?
Well, you read Steve Oney's book?
I haven't read it, I know about it, but what does his book say?
Well, let's just say that what Oney, he was a reporter for the Atlanta Constitution, Journal-Constitution, and he spent about 18 years researching all this. It's not the best history of the Leo Frank case from a historian's perspective because he didn't really know the historiography. But in terms of going through those court records, doing what a reporter does, he did a fabulous job. And he will say that you can never be 100% sure that Frank didn't do it and that Conley did, but that he's at least 80 or 90% sure that it was Conley. And
How many people were involved in that? I mean, I got this vision of a lynch mob.
No, the lynching.
Yeah.
I guess I was talking about who murdered Mary Fagan.
Yeah.
We were who murdered Leo.
But who murdered Leo Frank? Well,
That's in his book,
Herbert Clay was the solicitor for the equivalent to the DA for the Blue Ridge Circuit, which was not just Cobb County but all northwest Georgia. Newt Morris was the judge of the Blue Ridge Circuit. He puts those two as ringleaders in the conspiracy. I mean, they didn't do the dirty work. Ordinary folks did the dirty work, but these are the leaders in the county. And, you've got these top 2 court officials. I mean, it would be like Rob Flournoy and Joya Holmes conspiring together to lynch somebody. Jasper Dorsey's father, John Tucker Dorsey, is a member of the legislature, and he was on the prison committee, and that was pretty significant because they had to get Frank out of the state prison down in Milledgeville.
Somebody had to have the keys.
Well, he had the influence to get it done, and so he was involved. He was a very successful criminal attorney and then member of the legislature. The former governor of Georgia, Joseph Mackey Brown.
Not the Civil War.
Not Joseph A. but the son of Joseph E., who lived in Marietta, just a few blocks from here. I must say that I'm not totally convinced how involved Joseph M. Brown was. His grandson was very upset when this book came out.
Yeah.
And so I'm not real sure how much he was involved, but certainly those others, Clay and Morris and Dorsey.
One of the Brumbies was involved,
Yeah.
at least that's historically been, was passed along with its writing.
Yeah, and
And you just said Clay, is that any relation to the Clays you were talking about earlier?
Herbert was the son of the senator,
Okay.
and so a brother of Lucius Sr.
So why were these people, Ward Barnes just talked about going back and re-prosecuting this case based on the evidence. I don't know why, but
Why did they do it?
yeah, why did they do it?
Well, I don't think they had any doubt that Frank was guilty
In their mind.
in their mind.
Yeah.
I mean, historians can look back on the evidence nowadays and you can make a very compelling case. I mean, basically, Jim Conley changed his story at least 4 times at the police station. He was thoroughly coached on what he was supposed to say when he went in there. They first thought, there was a night watchman named, I forgot now, but there's another guy too that just actually discovered the body, and they pretty quickly decided he didn't do it. But there was certainly some question about Connolly, but when they realized that they had a case against Frank, I mean, they basically coached him what he was going to say, and everything was so racist, but the fact that when he got into the courtroom, Conley gave such compelling testimony, and the defense attorneys couldn't break his story. And you had all these white jurors looking at this black man that was a janitor, and they're saying, well, if the best attorneys in Georgia can't break his testimony, he must be telling the truth. A black man taking on these top attorneys, and he wins. He's the one that comes out standing. But he was the one that carried the body to the basement. He said Frank caught him into his office. The girl was already dead, and Frank ordered him to carry the body. There's a guy named Mann.
She was mangled though, wasn't she?
Yeah.
When she was mutilated.
What was his name? Alonzo Mann? There's a famous educator named something Mann.
Stag?
No, but anyway, there was a guy that was a 14-year-old office boy at the time. He actually was there at the time and saw Conway carrying the body. He went home, Conway told him, I'll kill you if you say anything. He went home, told his mother. His mother said, well, tell the truth if they ask you, but don't offer anything. Nobody ever asked him if he was there and saw Conway carrying the body. So he actually was a witness in the case, but they didn't ask him the right question, and he didn't volunteer it. And when he was in his 80s, he finally came forth. Some reporters from the Nashville Banner found him, and he told what he knew.
Yeah.
And Conway pretty much, Conway was went to jail anyway for his part in all of this, but he pretty much told his attorney 20 years or so later.
Tell me, while we've got you here right now, because I'm foggy on it, it was during the 1990 Olympics period, the Board of Commissioners passed an anti-gay resolution.
Yeah.
And we lost some Olympic venues because of it, and it tagged Cobb County as being kind of a racist community. At that time, we were probably 90% white, in high 80s anyway. And we had turned down MARTA because the quote from a lot of people, we didn't want them to come up here. And they were characterized as thieves and drug dealers and all
I
that.
don't think that's entirely true, that's why we turned down MARTA.
I'd like to know why you think we did if that's not the case.
On MARTA?
Yeah.
Well, I tell you, I interviewed Carolyn Meadows
Mhm.
a number of years ago, and her brother Dorsey, you know Dorsey Dungeon.
No, I don't know this one.
I was doing some interviews with Christina Jeffrey. We did some together. She set up the interviews because she knew all the, the right-wing people in Cobb County. I asked them, well, why? And, basically what they said is, we were promised that we would get rail lines by 1980, somewhere in the 1980s, like 1982. It's going to be like 18 years before it was going to happen. But we're going to be paying the 1 penny sales tax all along. And quite frankly, I think that Cobb County, lots of people were coming into East Cobb, but beginning to come into the area, still didn't have those sewer lines out to all those places, but they're beginning to move here. And the way I kind of characterize the people that moved into the burbs back in those days is that they were moving up in the world, they were moving into fine homes, they had nice jobs, but they didn't really have any job security. They were living paycheck to paycheck, and they were mightily attracted to conservative economics that said keep taxes as low as possible, because they were the property owners that were going to be paying those taxes. They couldn't afford it and keep their house and everything else at the same time. And they looked at that penny sales tax, what it was going to cost to have MARTA come here, and they said, what do we need buses for? We want to, they're not going to come out to East Cobb. I mean, if they build rail lines into Cobb today, they're not going to go to East Cobb. And so they said, we're not going to use them. Why should we pay for it? Particularly when we're not going to get rail line for 18 or 20 years anyway. And so, I interviewed a number of folks that, they were products of their culture, and certain things about race they had never even considered. And I would say, people say, well, the Cobb County turned down MARTA because of race. And they would look at me with the most astonished look on their face. And I think Dorsey Dodgen said this, race? There weren't any black people here. What did we care about race?
The problem was the coming here.
Well, yeah, but I think that may have been more the prejudice that Atlanta had against the burbs than what was actually happening in Cobb County. So that's my take on it, at least. I'm not saying they weren't racist, but I'm just saying that wasn't their primary motivation, I think, in most cases. I mean, Ernest Barrett supported MARTA.
Yeah. Well, he was, in some respects, I think, ahead of his time.
Yeah.
I wish I'd had a chance to interview him or talk to him.
Yeah, I do
Just
too.
such a powerful character in our history.
From what I've heard just in the little time I've been involved, you're going to have a lot about him.
I'll tell you what, there are two people, Ernest Barrett and Al Burris. I've been interviewing them when they retired, and they both died. Barrett died a month after he went out of office.
Really?
So I was never able to interview him.
Can I throw something in the pot? And it may or may not involve you, but you talk about the Bonner plant, and you talk about the sewage plants, and you talk about the Braves. What about the energy center?
It was just, it was an addition to the momentum that had already been created.
Nonetheless, to my way of thinking, nonetheless, it is emblematic of a great community that has what is basically an opera house.
That's why a lot of companies have come here, frankly, because part of our pitch has always been, it is a place where government will talk to you, work with you. You've got all the amenities of a nice place to live. We've got universities like KSU, the workforce development will be less than the
Major League
Cobb
Baseball.
Energy Center's always on there for entertainment.
Opera.
The Cumberland area was John Williams' vision and his money. If that had not occurred, it's a pretty big event actually in history.
I think, you replace the old Eastern Airlines reservation center where my wife used to work.
But, I guess, I think you hit the big three things. And, the coming of the Braves was equivalent to the announcement that Bell Aircraft was coming here, I think, and for reasons that you've already mentioned with what's happening around the battery. But it just seemed to me, the way I used to think of it, maybe the Brave story and the battery is changing this somewhat, but the way I used to think about it is that the history for 50 years after Bell came was building the infrastructure to create the quality of life that
We have
we
today.
enjoyed in Cobb County. Roads and schools and libraries and parks.
And sewers.
And sewers. And Ernest Barrett did all those, sewers and parks and libraries and whatever. He was involved in that. And it seems to me, that it's a lily white county. It seems to me that now that we're on the verge of being a majority-minority county, the challenge for the first half of the 21st century is to make diversity work in Cobb County. And we've already got an infrastructure, and the county's not growing as fast as it was before. I mean, once you fill up, you fill up. So we're not growing that much faster. We've slowed down compared to, say, the 90s in our growth in Cobb County, but still, the real challenge for our leadership is to make diversity work as we become increasingly a majority-minority county. And look at the census records. I think the thing that's most intriguing to me is that when we were a lily white county, we were one of the wealthiest counties in Georgia and really one of the wealthiest counties in the country. Now we're almost majority-minority. We're still one of the wealthiest counties in Georgia and one of the wealthiest counties in the country. And I think it's evidence of a black middle class and Asian middle class and Hispanic middle class and developing in Cobb County. And, we've got gangs and other problems that have come with growth as well in Cobb County. And yet we're still a very affluent county of middle class, not really super rich, but middle class rich type county. And I think that's, I think we need some really good sociological studies of why people come to Cobb County. I've tried to encourage people in our sociology department to do this for years. But the best I can tell from the people I talk to is that when blacks started moving to Cobb County, they were coming for the same reason whites came, because you had good schools, relatively low taxes, a good efficient government, and parks, and you name it, all those things that anybody wants.
Well, I'll
What
tell
they
you
need to do
the
is keep
story.
doing it the Cobb way.
Right.
I'll tell you the story of me. My wife and I were in Birmingham. I was working for Alabama Power for a long time, and then worked for Southern Company in Atlanta, but I still lived in Birmingham. So I had about 6 months, and I did my research with a lot of people. Where's the best place for me to locate? And Tom, to your point, it was East Cobb because of Walton Pope High School and the infrastructure, safety and security of the community. Same reasons, things like low taxes. I looked in North Fulton, and the tax would have cost me 30% more. And I'm 5 miles from the line. If I had gone 5 miles further, and I thought that didn't make any sense. So that's a decision I made. One of the things that you might find interesting, Tom, maybe you know this, when we started our strategic planning project, I brought in Market Street Services. You familiar with it?
I've heard the name.
Matt Holliday is the guy. Mac used to be, the Zell Miller brought him in to transform it. Anyway, Cobb County has the highest education attainment level of any county in Georgia, the 12th largest in the nation. Even though
45% have college degrees in Cobb County today.
at least a college undergraduate.
At least a bachelor's degree, and then 90-something%, 91, I think, has at least a high school degree.
And those are demographics companies look at when they want to locate. And that's why we've got this just incredible.
And you add that to the fact 45% of the people of Cobb County, age 25 and older, have at least a college degree. I don't know whether they count technical school degrees.
I think
they do, yeah. So 2-year degree or above.
What are those?
No, I think it's a bachelor's degree, isn't it, the 45%?
I think the 41% for 4 years, 45%
Okay.
Yeah.
But at any rate, that percentage has not gone down as we've become more diverse. And so that's a good indication of who's coming here, is people that are well educated.
Well, the reason the African American community has started coming back here is, to your point, the issue of racism is, and any perception of it, is gone by the wayside. We have been asking Tom, Ty can attest to this, we want to look at forks in the road. So, you know, we can go this way, it's going to cause you to do one thing. You go that way, you get a separate set of results. And what were the key forks in the road? One of them, we just found this out, or came to conclusion, one of the major forks in the road was the decision to hire David Hankerson as a first black county manager in obviously Cobb's history, but it made a huge statement about Cobb County. And I know it because I've talked to people around the region for years and years and years. I can't believe Cobb County had a black manager.
Right.
The other thing about him is the average life of a county manager is less than 4 years, usually 3 point something.
Yeah.
Hankerson's been there, what was it, Ty, 24 years, 25 years?
Yep, something like that.
Yeah. So he went through,
Went through all those years.
all the way through Tim Williams.
And that's the stuff we captured, which might be something you want to watch, if nothing else.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Ty and I will make any of these full videos available. They're kind of like we are right now. They're just conversations. And I'll tell you this story. Ty's heard it so many times, probably you have too. We sat down with Conley Ingram, who's senior judge.
Have you interviewed Bill Byrne?
Not yet.
You ought to.
Oh, I will. It's on my list.
I hate to interrupt you, but I was just thinking, Bill Byrne is as conservative as you can get.
Right.
And he's the one that brought Hankerson, he's
Right,
pretty conservative himself.
That's right.
But he's also the one with that family values resolution that lost us business during the Olympics. So, it's just
It's a fascinating story.
It's a fascinating story. Yeah. Sorry.
Oh, you did. No. So we went to the courthouse to interview Conley Ingram. He's a long-time judge, 80 years old. His mind is still as good as yours, Tom. He's got a wonderful mind and a wonderful wife.
Yeah,
that
Sylvia.
keeps him straight. Sylvia keeps him straight, and the straight and narrow.
I tell you, there's a lot of things with preservation in Cobb County that she was responsible for way back when, the youth museum.
Well, one of the things that I can tell you this also, everybody we've interviewed, we said, tell us about your family support. Because if you were a godfather, you were gone a lot. And the family had to be supported, the kids had to be raised, and tell us about your family support. But anyway, we interviewed Conley, and we were just adding videos to the story, and I ran into his daughter, Lark, at the event we did at Taylor English. And I said, Lark, let me tell you something just so you know it. She said, wow, it's fascinating. So she said, how long was it? I said, probably an hour and a half or so, maybe a little longer. So anyway, so I get a call from her later on. She said, I want a copy of that. And I said, we haven't edited it. She said, I don't care. I want to get a copy of that so my kids will have it. And therefore his grandkids, as they get older, will know who their father was. We always ask people to start from the time they were literally born until they got into their jobs. We're okay on tape?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're 4
Well,
o'clock.
I tell you what, I probably better be going to check up on my wife. She's been having trouble walking lately.
But anyway, we sent